Chapter 10. Shooting Gallery. Omar struggled to sit up in a sudden panic, thinking of teeth and enormous jaws, but there was no sign of the caiman. He was lying in a mass of leaves and branches that wanted to tangle him up. And there it was again. Bop! Something hit his head. He looked around for Bear. He wasn't there. And where was the caiman? Next to him were a couple of empty drinks cans. It wasn't very jungly, and he could hear the sound of girls laughing and chatting. Zing! Bop! Another empty can bounced off Omar's shoulder. He looked up. There was a branch just above him with a couple more cans perched on it. "Come on, we should be going," said a girl's voice. "One more," said another. Zing! Omar saw a rubber band zip past the branch. Bop! A shooting gallery. Omar clambered to his knees and stared over the branch. A group of 3 girls were walking away. They hadn't noticed him, but he recognised them all from camp. And that was where he now was. He looked around him. The trees were all normal size. He could see the sky. It wasn't incredibly steamy or hot, and there was no sign of Bear or the caiman. One of the girls was Chloe, the one who had chucked the plastic bottle on the ground earlier. And it didn't look like she was going to clear up these cans either. Omar pushed himself to his feet. He looked back at the bent branches where he'd been lying. Wow. He remembered getting lost after the race. He must have had a lie down and had a really weird dream. But it had been a good one. He felt so much happier than before. Omar picked up all the cans and rubber bands that he could find before he headed slowly back to join everyone else. There was no rush. Omar grinned. Bear would be pleased. But as he walked, Omar remembered how he had acted during the race and afterwards. Had it really been so important to him, setting a new record and winning at any cost? He had made a real fool of himself, especially with Sophie. He should apologise. When he got back to the clearing, everyone else was still chatting and laughing. He saw Sophie over on the other side, though she didn't notice him. Omar started towards the bins to get rid of the cans and the rubber bands. The pile in his arms was teetering and he had to speed up. The pile collapsed just as he reached the bins, and he aimed the cans so that most of them fell right in. But one of the rubber bands caught on the bandana tied around his wrist, the same red and white bandana that Bear had put on to keep his bandage in place. He remembered it so clearly. How he'd cut his hand, and Bear had cleaned it up. How Bear had checked on it as they trekked through the jungle, and how he'd kept it above the river water as he crossed. Omar studied his hand. The cut and the bandage were gone, just as if he had dreamed them. But there was the bandana tied around his wrist. Omar felt his heart thud in his chest. He really had been on an adventure to some other activity. With Bear, which meant he could get back to Bear. How had he found his way to the jungle in the first place? He remembered getting lost, and oh yes, he had tried to use that stupid trick compass. Omar pulled out the compass from his pocket and it showed the usual 4 directions, but he distinctly remembered that there had been 5. Then he stared for a moment. The dial seemed to spin on its own, and suddenly there were 5 directions again. At the same time, there was a clattering noise as a can hit the bin and bounced along the ground. "Goal!" Chloe shouted to her friend, and they laughed. Omar scowled. He remembered how Bear believed in taking care of the world around you. He knew Bear could teach Chloe a few useful things about that. Omar looked back at the compass dial. There were just 4 directions again, but it had definitely been 5, just as Chloe walked past. Omar's eyes went wide. Maybe it was that 5th direction. Maybe you couldn't find it. It had to find you. So Omar made a decision. Before going to apologise to Sophie, he had something to do. It looked like Chloe was heading off to some other activity. So Omar hurried forward and ducked in front of her. "Hi!" Hi." Chloe slowed down and then stopped. She was staring at Omar with a look that said, "Do you need something?" Omar thrust the compass at her before she could say anything. "I just wanted to give you this," he said. She took it, smiling but clearly puzzled. Omar tried to remember. What was it Sophie had said to him? Ah, yes. "Just consider it a gift," said Omar. The